There's a quiet ache you've carried for years, so quiet, in fact, that you sometimes forget it's there, but it hums underneath everything. It's in the way you stay silent when something hurts, in the way you rush to meet others' needs while quietly shelving your own. You don't do it for applause. You do it because somewhere along the line, you learned that love had to be earned, that your place in people's lives was conditional, that if you didn't make yourself useful, you might disappear altogether. And so you stayed, you gave, you adapted, you offered parts of yourself in exchange for belonging. You made yourself small so others could feel big. You made yourself last so others could come first. And it worked for a while. You kept the peace, held everything together, became the glue in everyone else's life. But one day, you looked around and realized no one was doing the same for you. What happens when the caregiver has no one to care for them, when the listener has no one to hear them, when the supporter falls apart in silence? That's where you find yourself now, in that raw space between exhaustion and awakening. Somewhere deep inside, you hear a faint whisper, "What about me?" This is not about becoming selfish. It's about remembering you exist, that your needs are not an inconvenience, that your pain is not imaginary, that your voice matters just as much as the ones you soothe every day. But to believe that, you have to unlearn something first, the idea that love is a reward for disappearing. Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So ask yourself, what parts of you have been living in the unconscious shadows of sacrifice? What inner child did you abandon so others wouldn't abandon you? These are not rhetorical questions. These are invitations to feel, to remember, to return. You weren't born believing you were secondary. That was a lesson taught by repetition. Maybe it started in childhood, when your feelings were brushed aside, when being good meant being quiet, when asking for more felt like asking for too much. You became the version of yourself that others could handle, but you lost the version that could truly feel. And now, you're tired. Not just physically tired, soul tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying everyone else while silently crumbling inside, the kind of tired that a nap can't fix. Because it's not rest your body needs, it's restoration of your worth. So, what do you do when you realize you've been last in your own life? You don't blame yourself. You don't harden, you soften, you listen. You begin the work of hearing your own name and your own voice. You ask, what do I want? When I'm not performing for love, what do I feel? When I stop managing everyone else's emotions, what do I need right now? Without guilt. These questions are terrifying because they threaten the fragile identity you've built, the one that says, I'm only worthy if I'm useful. But they're also liberating because behind them lies the truth. You are already worthy. Even when you're resting, even when you're saying no, even when you're messy, honest, unpolished, and undone. Putting yourself first isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before you were taught to forget. The world will keep pulling at your sleeves, asking for your energy, your time, your approval. But at some point, you'll realize the most radical act of healing is to say, I choose me. And that choice, it ripples. It doesn't just shift your life, it shifts your energy, your relationships, your inner world. You start showing up with boundaries, not bitterness, with clarity, not resentment, with truth, not performance. You start to recognize the cost of self-abandonment, and you decide you're not willing to pay it anymore. So if all you do today is whisper, I matter too, that's enough. Let that be your starting point. Because healing doesn't begin with grand declarations, it begins with the smallest act of remembrance. You're not last anymore. You are the beginning. There is a moment in your healing where everything becomes quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. The noise of other people's needs, the pressure to be likable, the habit of saying yes before you even check in with yourself, it all falls away, if only for a minute. And in that silence, something unnerving happens. You finally have to face yourself. It's not as easy as it sounds, because when you've spent years focusing outward, meeting the expectations of others, it feels disorienting to turn inward. There's no applause in the mirror, no validation, just you, raw and unguarded. The truth is, Sometimes it's easier to keep serving others than it is to see what you've neglected within. You may find that looking into your own eyes feels like looking into a stranger's. You've been performing so long being dependable, being nice, being fine that you forgot who lives beneath the roles. And yet, the mirror is honest. It doesn't reflect who you're pretending to be. It reflects the fatigue in your bones, the hunger in your soul, the ache of unspoken dreams. Carl Jung believed that every person carries a shadow, the parts of ourselves we've rejected, denied, or buried. And the longer you avoid your reflection, the more the shadow runs your life in secret. You begin to project your hidden needs onto others, hoping they'll give you what you won't allow yourself space. Attention, love, truth. But they can't. They never could, because what you're looking for is you. It's in the mirror that your deeper healing begins, not because it's comfortable, but because it's honest. You see the parts you've neglected, the one who longs for rest, the one who's afraid to speak, the one who never learned to receive. And maybe you also see the part that's angry. Angry at yourself for waiting this long. Angry at the world for making you believe you had to wait at all. Let the anger rise. Don't suppress it this time. Anger is a sacred fire. It burns away illusion. It reveals what matters. It tells the truth you've been silencing. I'm not okay with being invisible anymore. And when that truth rises, don't turn away. Don't distract yourself with someone else's problem. Stay. Look. Listen. There's a kind of bravery in being still with yourself, to look at your own eyes and not flinch, to see the sadness you've carried and not try to fix it, to feel your loneliness without rushing to earn connection. This is the slow, sacred work of reclaiming yourself. You do not heal by changing into someone else. You heal by becoming deeply intimate with the self you've always been. So ask yourself gently, who am I when I'm not saving anyone? What have I been avoiding by staying busy when I stop numbing with productivity? What emotion comes to the surface? It might be grief. Grief for the time you lost trying to be enough. Grief for the younger version of you who just wanted to feel seen. Let yourself feel it. Let the tears come if they need to. Healing is not neat. It's not curated. It's messy and sacred and true. And the more honest you are with yourself, the less you'll need the world to mirror back something false. Because here's the truth. The mirror you've been avoiding is not your enemy. It's your gateway. It holds the reflection of your real self, the one who is tired of the performance, the one who's ready to come home. But that self can't emerge until you're willing to sit in the quiet discomfort of your own truth. There will be days when the old habits creep in again, when you want to say yes just to feel loved, when you reach for your phone to avoid sitting with your feelings, when you volunteer for someone else's healing just to avoid your own. But each time you catch yourself, you're awakening. Each time you pause and say, wait, what do I need right now? You're turning toward your mirror instead of away. And the more you do this, the less afraid you'll be, because you'll begin to trust what you see. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. You'll see your softness, your power, your wounds, your hope. You'll see your shadow, not as something to fear, but as something to befriend. Because even the parts you've exiled are still a part of you. They're just waiting for reintegration, waiting to be welcomed home. So take one deep breath. Stand before your reflection, not to fix, not to criticize, just to witness. You're not broken. You're becoming. You don't need to hide anymore. There's a tenderness in you that has always made you give. You've called it compassion, generosity, loyalty. And it is until it's not, until the giving becomes a compulsion, until kindness becomes the mask you wear to avoid confrontation, until your warmth becomes a way to keep people close, because deep down, you're terrified of what will happen if you stop pleasing them. You've told yourself that it's love, that selflessness is a virtue, that putting others first makes you good. But underneath that polished exterior, there's a deeper story, a story that Carl Jung would say belongs to the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It's simply the hidden. And behind your kindness, there may live a secret, the fear of rejection, the belief that you are only lovable if you are useful, the anxiety that if you ever disappoint someone, they'll leave. So you overextend. You say yes when you mean no. You anticipate needs that haven't even been spoken. You give until you're empty, and then you wonder why you feel invisible. But this pattern isn't about generosity. It's about survival, somewhere in your early life. You learned that the safest way to exist was to be pleasing. That emotional safety came not from being real, but from being needed. The shadow loves to disguise itself. It shows up as politeness when what you're really feeling is rage. It shows up as helpfulness when you're secretly craving rest. It shows up as agreement when your soul is screaming, "I disagree." You become so good at being agreeable that you've forgotten what it feels like to truly be authentic. But there's a cost to this. Every time you silence your truth to keep someone comfortable, you abandon a part of yourself. Every time you say yes out of fear rather than choice, your shadow grows stronger, and slowly, you start to resent the very people you're trying to please. Not because they're bad, but because you've made their needs more important than your own. Pause with that. Let it sink in. Your kindness is not wrong, but when it's driven by fear, it's not love, it's self-erasure. And the person you erase is always you. There's a moment in healing when you begin to see this clearly. Maybe it happens in the middle of yet another conversation where you're nodding, smiling, suppressing your real thoughts. Maybe it happens after you've bent over backwards for someone, only to realize they never asked you to and they never even noticed. Or maybe it's when your body starts to rebel, tight shoulders, clenched jaw, constant exhaustion trying to tell you you're giving too much and it's killing your joy. When that moment arrives, it's easy to feel shame, to think, how did I let it go this far? But shame is just another disguise of the shadow. The truth is, you were doing what you thought you had to do. You were loving the only way you knew how. You were surviving. But now, you get to choose differently. The antidote to shadow-driven kindness isn't coldness. It's clarity. It's learning to love without losing yourself. It's recognizing that boundaries are not walls, they're bridges to deeper connection. Because only when you are honest can someone truly love you for who you are. So ask yourself, where in your life are you pretending to be okay just to keep the peace? What part of you is afraid to say no because it might change how someone sees you? What would happen if your love wasn't about proving your worth, but about honoring your truth? You might lose some people, that's true, when you stop overgiving. Some will call you selfish. When you start saying no, some will question your change. But the ones who truly love you will stay, and more importantly, you will stay with yourself. Carl Jung spoke often of individuation, the process of becoming your true self, whole and undivided. You can't reach wholeness by denying your shadow. You reach it by facing it, embracing it, and letting it teach you. Your shadow behind the kindness says, "I'm tired of pretending. I want to be real. Listen." This is the invitation to stop performing compassion and start living in truth. To stop fearing disapproval and start honoring your inner yes and your sacred no. To stop giving love only as a means of control and start offering it as an overflow of a self who is already full. You don't have to stop being kind. You just have to stop disappearing in the process. It's strange how guilt can feel heavier than grief, how a simple no can feel like betrayal. You know the pattern by now, how your stomach knots when you set a boundary, how your chest tightens when you put your own needs first. It doesn't feel like relief. It feels like danger, as if the ground might collapse under your feet for choosing yourself. That's the fog of obligation, thick, consuming, deceptive. You don't always see it clearly because it's been with you so long. It speaks in the voice of duty, in the language of loyalty. It says, "You owe them." It says, "You're being unfair." It says, "What will they do without you?" And you listen not because you agree, but because guilt is louder than truth when you've been conditioned to put everyone else first. But ask yourself, who benefits from your guilt? Who taught you that love and obligation are the same thing? That being a good person means saying yes, even when your soul whispers no. Carl Jung understood that we inherit more than genetics. We inherit psychic patterns. And somewhere along your lineage, whether through culture, family, or experience, you learned that guilt was the price of goodness, that your worth was tangled in your willingness to sacrifice. It's no wonder you feel disoriented now. Choosing yourself feels like rebellion, as if claiming space means stealing it from someone else. You feel selfish for wanting solitude, for protecting your energy, for refusing to be available at all times. But selfishness isn't the absence of love. Sometimes it's the beginning of it. Guilt is not always a signal that you've done something wrong. Sometimes it's a sign that you're breaking a pattern. And patterns don't dissolve quietly, they protest. They demand you stay small, compliant, predictable. But healing asks more of you. It asks that you become conscious of the ways you've been taught to betray yourself in order to belong. So next time the fog rolls in and you feel the familiar guilt after setting a boundary, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, am I hurting someone or simply disappointing their expectations of me? There's a difference, and one of them is not your responsibility to carry. Because the people who love you in truth, not just convenience, will survive your boundaries. The ones who don't were never loving the real you. They were loving the version of you who never said no. There is no healing without discomfort. You will feel shaky the first few times you stand your ground. You might question yourself, replay conversations, worry that you've done something wrong. That's okay. Let it happen. Don't rush to silence those doubts. Sit with them. Let the guilt rise like mist, and then watch it dissolve in the clarity of your own choice. And what happens when you keep choosing yourself, even through the guilt? Something remarkable. The fog begins to lift. You start to see the world differently. You begin to feel what it's like to be in relationships that don't demand your self-sacrifice. You start to experience a love that doesn't require you to earn it every day. You begin to taste the freedom of living from truth instead of fear. The inner shift is subtle but profound. Instead of asking, what do they want from me? You begin to ask, what do I want for myself, instead of anticipating others' needs? You start honoring your own. You don't stop being loving. You just stop being consumed. You stop leaking energy in every direction and start containing it, rooting it in self-awareness, in self-regard. You may even notice that you've become calmer, less reactive, less desperate to fix or please or manage. That's not distance, it's alignment. Because when you stop trying to live up to other people's stories, you finally start writing your own. This is the quiet revolution of healing. Not a grand, dramatic severing, but a steady, gentle return to yourself. You begin to walk away from guilt as a guide, and instead follow something deeper, your intuition, your body, your truth, and with every step, the fog recedes a little more. So the next time you feel that guilt creeping in like smoke, trying to shame you back into smallness, remind yourself gently, I am not responsible for how others react to my healing. I am only responsible for honoring what's true for me. And as that truth strengthens, so do you. You are not here to live in the fog forever. You are here to remember the sun. It happens softly, almost imperceptibly, a quiet refusal, a sentence shorter than you expected, no dramatic explanation, no long apology, just a clear, gentle no. And in that moment, something inside you exhales for the first time in years. You've spent so long saying yes out of habit that saying no feels unnatural, like trying to walk backwards uphill. Your muscles resist, your throat tightens, your heart races. Because this isn't just a word, it's a boundary, a declaration, a reclamation of self that whispers, I don't owe my peace to anyone else anymore. And still, the fear comes. What if they get upset? What if they pull away? What if they think I'm ungrateful, cold, distant? You've built a life around anticipating these responses. You've internalized the belief that you're only lovable when agreeable, only worthy when compliant. But something's different now, because this time, you said no anyway. That's the shift. It doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be explained. It just has to be real. And it is. Carl Jung taught that individuation is the process of becoming whole, of integrating the pieces of ourselves that have long been fragmented or ignored. In that moment of saying no, you begin to retrieve one of those fragments, your inner protector, the part of you that knows how to say, this is not mine to carry, the part that honors your limits as sacred instead of shameful. You've been taught that love is earned through effort, that it requires contortion, But every time you shapeshift to meet someone else's needs, you chip away at your center. It's no wonder you felt scattered, tired, untethered. You've been leaving pieces of yourself behind in exchange for temporary closeness. But now you've chosen differently. You've chosen to keep yourself intact. Saying no is more than just a refusal. It's a turning point. It's the moment you stop prioritizing comfort over truth. It's the day you realize that your energy is not infinite, that your soul is not a resource for others to mine. And it's the beginning of a new kind of relationship, not just with others, but with yourself. You'll notice how the world responds. Some people may pull away. They may not know how to handle your wholeness when they've only known your compliance. Let them. Others will stay. And those who do will meet the real you, the one who doesn't perform, doesn't people please, doesn't disappear. But perhaps the most important shift is internal. You begin to feel a subtle sense of peace after the panic fades, a deep-rooted calm that says, "This is what safety feels like." Not safety as defined by other people's approval, but safety in your own body, your own choice, your own voice. You may even grieve a little, because saying no means confronting what you've tolerated. It means seeing, often for the first time, how much of yourself you gave away just to avoid rejection. That grief is sacred. It's not a mistake. It's your body mourning the years you didn't know you could choose differently. Let it come. Let it move through you like a wave. You don't need to resist it anymore. And on the other side of that grief power, not the power that dominates, the power that grounds, that anchors, that says, "I know what I need. I trust myself to speak it, and I no longer fear who leaves when I do." So ask yourself now, where have you been saying yes to avoid discomfort? What have you been agreeing to out of fear, not choice? What part of you is aching for the relief of a firm, clear no? It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need the right words. You just need presence, honesty, a willingness to listen inward and act from that place, even when your voice trembles, especially when it does. Because trembling doesn't mean weakness. It means transformation. It means your nervous system is meeting a new truth for the first time, and that truth is you get to exist on your own terms. So go slowly. Let each no be a pebble placed firmly on the ground beneath your feet, one step at a time. You build a path back to yourself. You don't have to run. You don't have to prove. You just have to keep choosing you, one quiet, powerful no at a time. And in that choosing, your healing deepens. Your wholeness returns. There's a kind of silence that feels like peace, and then there's the other kind. The kind you know too well, the kind that simmers, that clogs your throat when you're not speaking your truth, that settles into your chest like unburned fuel. It doesn't soothe you. It scorches you from the inside, and you call it calm, you call it control. But really, it's fire, fire that's been held back for too long. This silence is not serenity, it's suppression. You've trained yourself to bite your tongue, to swallow your needs, to nod along while something inside you wants to scream. And why? Because you feared what your voice might destroy. Because someone, somewhere, once made you believe that being too much was dangerous. But there comes a moment when the silence can no longer hold the heat, when the effort to seem composed becomes more painful than the truth you're burying. That moment is not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. It's the fire finally refusing to stay hidden. Carl Jung wrote about the energy that lives in the unconscious, how what we repress does not disappear, but instead grows in intensity, waiting to be expressed. That fire you feel, it's not rage for rage's sake. It's energy that belongs to your real self, the self who is tired of enduring, the self who has something to say. You don't have to erupt. This isn't about burning bridges. It's about warming your soul. It's about reclaiming the voice that was hushed, the passion that was punished, the truth that was never welcomed. You're not here to be palatable. You're here to be real. Think back, how many times did you shrink so someone else wouldn't feel insecure? How often did you agree just to avoid tension? How many times did you stay silent to keep the peace, only to wage a war within yourself? Every one of those moments lit a match inside you, and now the room is glowing, not in destruction, but in clarity. The fire within you is sacred. It doesn't demand violence. It demands honesty. It says, "I'm here. I matter, I'm not hiding anymore. And yet, you hesitate, because unleashing that truth still feels risky. What if people get uncomfortable? What if they misunderstand? What if they leave? But what if you finally stayed with yourself? Let yourself speak, not to convince, not to win, but to honor the part of you that's been silenced for too long. Speak even if your voice shakes. Speak even if you cry. Let your words be imperfect, raw, unrehearsed. They don't need to be tidy. They need to be true. You may find that when you finally express what's real, the world doesn't fall apart. Some people may actually lean in, not everyone. Of course, but the ones who do, they'll see you more clearly, and you'll see yourself with new eyes, too, not as someone who held it all together, but as someone who finally let it come undone. And that undoing, that's your liberation. Ask yourself now, what have I been holding in because I thought it was too much? What do I need to say not to someone else, but to myself? What truth is burning beneath my silence, waiting to be heard? You may be surprised by the answers. You may discover grief, or longing, or even joy. Because sometimes, it's not just pain we silence, it's our deepest desires. It's the dreams we've tucked away because we thought they were impractical, or selfish, or impossible. Let the fire clear the space for those dreams to return. This is not about being loud. It's about being lit from within. You don't need to shout. You just need to stop whispering apologies for your existence. You are not too much. You are everything you were meant to be, unfiltered. So speak. Say what you mean. Ask for what you need. Choose the words that come from the center of your chest, even if they make your hands tremble. This is how the fire softens. This is how the silence ends. Beneath all the noise, beneath the performing, the pleasing, the protecting, there is a softness in you that hasn't been touched in a very long time. You've armored yourself for so long that you almost forgot it was there. But still, it waits. Still, it calls. In the moments between tasks, in the stillness before sleep, in the ache that appears for no logical reason at all. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the inner feminine within every psyche, regardless of gender. This isn't about roles or identity. It's about essence. The anima is the part of you that longs not to perform, but to feel, not to conquer, but to surrender, not to explain, but to be seen. She holds the depth, the intuition, the creativity, the vulnerability you may have silenced in your quest to survive. And she's tired of waiting. You've been strong. You've been responsible. You've carried others when you barely had the strength to stand. But strength without softness becomes brittle. It breaks under the pressure of unacknowledged pain. And that's why your healing must now move inwards, into the quiet longing of the anima. She's not loud. She doesn't demand. She whispers. She weeps. She watches. And sometimes she withdraws. Not because she's weak, but because she has grown tired of not being honored. This part of you has known what you truly need long before your mind could catch up. She feels your exhaustion. She feels the disconnect. And she's asking no, begging to be let back in. To let her in, you must be willing to slow down. You must be willing to let go of being impressive and instead become intimate. Intimate with your own breath, your own rhythms, your own tenderness. That's terrifying when your worth has been defined by how well you manage, perform, and achieve. But this is not a performance. This is a return. Let her guide you. She is not asking for perfection. She's asking for presence. To sit with a cup of tea and not rush. To cry without immediately justifying the tears. To create something for the sake of joy, not for approval. To rest without guilt. To feel beautiful without needing to prove it. Your anima knows how to soften without collapsing. She knows how to grieve without drowning. She knows how to love without losing herself. But she cannot lead if you do not listen. And listening requires trust. Trust in the wisdom of stillness. Trust in the intelligence of your emotions. Trust in the part of you that does not shout, but knows. You may feel resistance. That's normal. You've learned to survive through control. The anima asks you to surrender, not to chaos, but to authenticity, She doesn't want you to fall apart. She wants you to fall inward, to descend into the parts of yourself you've labeled too tender, too irrational, too much. She knows your loneliness. She knows your yearning. She knows the ache you feel when you smile and it doesn't reach your eyes. She knows how tired you are of being strong, and she is not ashamed of any of it. Can you meet her there? Can you let the tears come when you feel them rising? Can you rest your hand on your own chest and say, I'm here now? Can you let yourself want, not in a way that seeks validation, but in a way that says, my desires are sacred, too? Because when you honor the anima, something inside you begins to glow again. You don't become less capable, you become more whole, more human, more alive. The world may not applaud your softness, but your soul will. So ask yourself, where have I silenced my softness to survive? What does my inner feminine, my anima, long for in this moment? How would I move through life if I let her guide me for a while? Start small. Let yourself feel. Let yourself want. Let yourself be. You don't need to earn rest. You don't need to explain your tears. You just need to remember the part of you that was never meant to disappear. Let her speak again. Let her be heard. Let her lead you home. You spend years looking outward, trying to decipher why you feel the way you do, why people leave, why love feels conditional, why certain people seem to awaken something old in you, something that burns, something that clings, something that aches. And at some point, if you're willing to be honest, you realize not all of this belongs to them. That's the unraveling. Because the truth is, much of what you've seen in others was never truly about them. It was about you, your unmet needs, your unhealed wounds, your unloved parts, in Jungian terms. This is projection when the unconscious content of your own psyche is cast like a film onto someone else, and you call it reality. You think someone is judging you, but it's really your own inner critic, cloaked in their silence. You believe someone will abandon you, but it's the child in you remembering when love was withheld. You fall in love with someone's strength, but it's your own power you've yet to claim. Projection is not failure. It's feedback. It's the psyche's way of revealing what you have not yet integrated, and it becomes clearest in relationships, especially the ones that trigger, stir, or consume you. That intensity isn't a sign that you've found your missing piece. It's a flare from your own shadow saying, look here, this is yours. So you chase, you reach, you give too much, you lose yourself in the effort to be chosen, because you believe deep down that if this person stays, maybe the parts of you they reflect will finally feel lovable, but no one outside you can rescue your exiled self. Not sustainably, not truly. That's your work, your task, your sacred return. Let this land every time you fall into projection. You're being offered a mirror. The question is, do you want to look into it or keep blaming the surface? It takes courage to admit you've been looking for your own soul in someone else's face. To acknowledge that the love you crave isn't just for them, it's for the neglected parts of you that you see more clearly in their presence. But there's freedom on the other side of this. When you stop expecting others to carry what you've disowned, you begin to reclaim it. That strength you admire, it's yours to embody. That tenderness you long for, it's yours to give to yourself. That validation you keep chasing, it's yours to internalize. This doesn't mean you stop loving others. It means you love from clarity, not compulsion. You begin to see people as they are, not as stand-ins for something missing inside you. And you stop entering relationships to be saved and start entering them as someone already whole. This shift changes everything. You stop taking everything personally. You stop contorting yourself to keep the connection. You begin to witness your emotional triggers not as facts, but as invitations. You ask, why did this hurt so deeply? What old wound is being touched here? What belief about myself is being mirrored back? And when you ask those questions, you begin to unmask your projections. You see how often you've made someone else your source of worth. You see how you've called fear intuition when it was really just unprocessed pain. You see how often you've mistaken intensity for love when it was really your inner child's desperate hope finally being stirred awake. This is not about blame. It's about responsibility. And responsibility, in this case, is an act of self-love. It says, I will no longer hand my power to someone else and call it fate. I will no longer confuse longing with love. I will face myself. Because the deeper you go into your own psyche, the less you need someone else to reflect it for you. You still welcome love, of course, but not from hunger, from fullness, not from fear of abandonment, from a rootedness in your own soul. And when projections end, real intimacy begins. You're no longer seeing a fantasy, you're seeing a person, and they are seeing you, not the version of you that's performing, the version of you that's awake. So ask yourself now, with tenderness, who have I been projecting onto lately? What are they reflecting that I haven't owned in myself? What would happen if I stopped chasing them and started loving the part of me they bring into focus? Breathe with that. Let the answers come without judgment. And remember, every projection, once reclaimed, becomes a portal, a way back to your own heart, a path toward wholeness, a quiet unmasking of the truth. You were never missing anything. You were simply waiting to see it within. There comes a day, not always with trumpets or grand signs, but quietly, almost like a whisper when you stop waiting, waiting for someone to pick you, waiting for someone to see how much you've given, waiting for someone to choose you in the way you've refused to choose yourself. It's a subtle turning, a breath that feels different in your chest, a decision not made from anger, but from clarity. You realize this waiting has become a kind of ache, not because people don't care, but because you've made their love the condition for your worth. You've handed them the mirror and asked, please reflect something beautiful back to me. But mirrors can be cracked. Mirrors can lie. Mirrors can't show you what you refuse to see without them. So you stop. Not out of bitterness, not because you're giving up. You stop because you're waking up to the truth that the love you crave begins with you. Carl Jung taught that healing requires individuation, becoming who you truly are beneath the masks, the projections, the scripts you were given, and you cannot become whole while outsourcing your self-worth to another. You cannot find freedom while tethered to the idea that someone else's validation is the doorway to your peace. This choice to choose yourself is not about isolation. It's about sovereignty. It's about saying, I no longer need to beg for scraps of attention to feel alive. It's about ending the contract you didn't know you signed, the one where your needs only matter if someone else agrees they do. That contract burns now. You are writing a new one. A soul-deep vow to listen when your body says no, to honor the voice inside you that says enough, to stop proving, performing, and perfecting just to earn what should be freely given. You won't get it right all at once. That's okay. Choosing yourself is not a single decision. It's 1,000 quiet choices made over time. Each time you say, I don't need to explain this, you choose yourself. Each time you say, my peace matters, you choose yourself. Each time you take up space without apology, you choose yourself. And what happens when you do? At first, discomfort. Your old identity resists. The part of you that believed love was something earned through self-sacrifice will panic. It will whisper, you're selfish, you're too much. They'll leave you. That voice isn't evil, it's familiar. It's the echo of a time when you truly needed others to survive. But you are not that powerless child anymore. You are capable of holding your own heart now. And when you do, the world around you begins to shift. Not always dramatically. Sometimes it's as small as saying no without explanation. Sometimes it's walking away from a conversation that drains you. Sometimes it's looking in the mirror and saying, I'm proud of you, even if no one else does. These small rebellions against your former self are the building blocks of a new inner home. And one day, you notice you're no longer performing in conversations. You're no longer tolerating what used to break you. You're no longer waiting for someone else to grant you permission to be whole. You are simply being, grounded, honest, awake. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means it becomes true. Because when you choose yourself, you attract truth. People who see you as you are, not as a fantasy, not as a function, but as a soul. And you no longer fear being alone, because you've met the one person who was always missing in your life, you. So ask yourself now, in what ways have I delayed my own healing while waiting to be chosen? What would my life look like if I made myself the priority, not the afterthought? What becomes possible when I finally, fully say yes to me? You are not too late. You are right on time. The choice is here. And once you make it, once you truly, deeply say, I'm done abandoning myself, everything begins to change, not because the world shifts, but because your center does. And in that shift, a quiet knowing blooms. I am not broken. I am becoming. It doesn't come with fanfare. It doesn't arrive on a specific date. The peace you've been longing for creeps in like a soft breath at the end of an exhale. You may not even notice it at first because it's so unfamiliar, but there it is. A stillness, a loosening in your chest, a quiet morning when you no longer feel the need to justify your existence. You are coming home. Not to a place, to yourself. And the path here was never linear. It was made of every no you were terrified to say, every tear you let fall when no one was watching, every truth you finally admitted to yourself after years of pretending it didn't hurt. You did not arrive by accident. You arrived because you finally stopped abandoning the person you've always been. Carl Jung often spoke of wholeness, not perfection, but integration, the conscious embracing of your light and shadow, your softness and your strength, your knowing and your doubt. And now you begin to understand the peace you've been searching for outside was always waiting inside, beneath the layers of performance and protection. You don't have to fight to be seen anymore. You see yourself. You don't have to chase love anymore. You feel it rooting in your own bones. You don't have to prove your worth. You simply know it now, not as an idea, but as a lived truth. And the people who meet you here, who meet you in this space of wholeness, will recognize you, not for what you can do for them, but for who you are when you are fully being. It feels like rest. It feels like exhaling. It feels like no longer shrinking when you enter a room, no longer scanning faces for signs that you're allowed to exist. You've made that decision already. You are allowed. You always were. And now you get to live from that truth. There will still be days when the old voices try to pull you back, when guilt visits, when fear whispers, when the mirror reflects doubt instead of love. But now you know how to return to center. You've built an inner home. And that home has a voice that says, you are safe here, you are loved here, you are enough. So ask yourself, softly, what does it feel like to live without performing? What becomes possible when I stop living in reaction and begin to live in intention? What if peace isn't something I find, but something I remember? Because that's the secret. You were never lost. You just forgot. And now you remember. You remember that your softness is strength, that your truth is sacred, that your presence matters. You remember that wholeness was never about becoming someone new. It was about returning to someone ancient, someone real, someone who has always lived quietly beneath the noise. That someone is you. Breathe with that. Let it settle. Let it echo. You don't need to do anything else right now, not fix, not perform. Just be. The work is already working. The choice has already been made. You have chosen you. And the world may not shift overnight, but your inner world already has. This is the new baseline. Not chaos, not overextension, but calm, trust, grounded love. And the more you live from here, the more you draw in what's aligned, the more you speak from here, the more your words carry truth, the more you love from here, the more your love becomes freedom instead of fusion. You are no longer seeking approval. You are standing in your essence. You are no longer fragmenting for connection. You are whole. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are home. And now, let it all settle. Let the rhythm of your breath return you gently to stillness. There is no more striving here, no more weight of expectation pressing on your chest, no more script to follow or role to perform. You are here, just as you are, and that is enough. Let your shoulders drop. Let the tight places in your spirit loosen. Let every word you've heard tonight sink softly beneath the surface, not to be analyzed, but to be held. The journey back to yourself is not a destination. It is a remembering. And with every quiet choice to honor your truth, you step closer to peace. You may not have all the answers, but you have the one that matters. You are allowed to put yourself first. You are allowed to choose rest, to choose truth, to choose wholeness. Because when you do, you teach the world how to meet the real you, the unhidden you, the deeply loved you. There's nothing left to prove, nothing left to chase. Only a gentle return, over and over again, to the center of your being, the part of you that never needed to be fixed. Only seen, only loved, only reclaimed. And as you rest now, let this truth settle deep into your bones. The love you seek is already within you.